Most people have a complicated relationship with time. They feel there is never enough of it. They spend it carefully, guard it jealously, and still arrive at the end of the week, with the unsettling sense that it went somewhere they cannot account for. They make plans to use it better, download apps to track it, build systems to protect it from being wasted, and find, after all of this, that the anxiety about time has not reduced, but increased, because now they are also watching themselves fail to execute the systems. The problem is not, as most productivity advice assumes, that people lack the right method for managing time. The problem is that they are thinking about time incorrectly, that the entire frame time as a resource to be allocated, spent, saved, and optimized contains an assumption that makes the experience of time worse rather than better, and that a tradition developed over 1,000 years in Japan identified this problem and articulated its solution long before the first productivity app existed. The concept is Mujo, and it means impermanence. Mujo comes from the Sanskrit concept of anicca, one of the 3 marks of existence in Buddhist teaching, that all conditioned phenomena are impermanent, that nothing that arises persists unchanged, that every state pleasant or painful, desired or feared, is already in the process of dissolving even as it appears. In Japan, this teaching arrived with Buddhism in the 6th century and became foundational to the culture in a way that is difficult to overstate. The aesthetic traditions that the world associates with Japan, the appreciation of cherry blossoms, the wabi-sabi embrace of weathered objects, the spare beauty of the Zen garden are all, at their root, expressions of Mujo. They are not merely decorative preferences. They are practices for perceiving and accepting impermanence, rather than fighting it. The Japanese word Mujo is written with 2 characters, mu, meaning without or nothing, and jo, meaning constancy or permanence. Without constancy, the philosophical claim is not merely that things change, which is obvious, but that permanence was never available. That the search for it is not just futile, but misconceived from the beginning. There is no stable ground to find. There is only this, and then this, and then this. What this means for time is something most productivity systems never address. The reason time feels scarce is not that there is too little of it. It is that the mind keeps trying to hold moments that have already moved on. There is a specific mechanism by which Mujo becomes practically relevant to daily experience. When something good is happening, a meal you enjoy, a conversation that is going well, a period of work that feels alive, the mind does not simply experience it. It simultaneously begins to monitor it. How long will this last? Is it as good as it was a moment ago? What will I do when it ends? The monitoring consumes part of the experience. Even as the experience is occurring, the moment is present, but a portion of attention has already departed from it, reaching into a future where the moment will be gone. This is not a moral failing. It is the natural behavior of a mind that has not accepted impermanence, that still believes, somewhere beneath conscious awareness, that if it pays close enough attention, it might catch permanence in the act of occurring, that it might find the stable version of the good thing, the version that does not end. Mujo says that version does not exist. And understanding this, really understanding it, not as an intellectual proposition, but as a felt reality, does something unexpected. It does not produce resignation or detachment. It produces presence. When you are no longer monitoring an experience for permanence, because you have genuinely accepted that permanence is not available, you are released from the monitoring. The attention that was spent searching for the stable version of the moment becomes available to inhabit the actual moment, which is unstable, temporary, and the only one there is. The Zen teacher Dogen, writing in 13th century Japan, expressed this with characteristic precision. To study the self is to forget the self, by which he meant in part that the self that is constantly tracking and evaluating experience is not the self that experiences it. The observer and the participant cannot fully occupy the same moment. To actually be in time, you must stop trying to hold it. The practical implication shows up most clearly in how people relate to endings. A project ends. A period of life concludes. A relationship changes. The normal response is grief, resistance, a wish that things had been otherwise, not because the ending was bad, but because endings themselves feel like a failure of something that should have been permanent. The attachment was not only to the thing itself, but to the continued existence of the thing, to the version that would not end. Mujo offers a different orientation. Not the absence of grief. Zen is not stoic indifference. And the Japanese aesthetic of mono, no aware, the bittersweet recognition of transience, is explicitly about the emotional texture of impermanence, not its suppression. The cherry blossoms are beautiful, in part, because they fall. The pathos is inseparable from the beauty. The difference is between grief that resists the ending, that converts loss into an argument against impermanence, and grief that moves through the ending without getting caught there. The first extends suffering indefinitely by maintaining the fiction that things should have lasted. The second acknowledges the ending as the natural completion of something real, mourns it proportionally, and continues. People who have internalized Mujo do not grieve less, they grieve cleanly. There is a practice in Zen called impermanence contemplation, which is exactly what it sounds, like sitting with the fact that everything currently present, this body, these relationships, this moment, this life, is already moving toward its end. Not as a morbid exercise in pessimism, but as a calibration, as a way of checking whether the way you are spending attention today is how you would spend it. If you knew, with full clarity, what you already intellectually know, the samurai engaged with this daily. The meditation on death Shi no Meso was central to Bushido, not because warriors were morbid, but because clarity about impermanence produces clarity about value. What is actually worth protecting? What is worth risking everything for? What, given that everything ends, genuinely matters? These questions become answerable once the illusion of permanence is released. There is a famous passage from the Hagakure, the 18th century text on samurai philosophy, that states, "The way of the samurai is found in death." This has often been read as glorifying violence, but the actual meaning is more precise. A warrior who is genuinely at peace with the fact of his own death is freed from the paralysis of self-preservation. He can act clearly, without the distortion that comes from needing the outcome to be survival. The acceptance of impermanence, including the impermanence of the self, is not a morbid fixation. It is the condition for full engagement. The same logic applies in less dramatic circumstances. The person who has accepted that a relationship will change is freer within it. The person who has accepted that a career phase will end can inhabit it more fully. The acceptance of the ending does not diminish the experience. It intensifies it because the experience is no longer being shadowed by the effort to prevent its conclusion. The effect is not that everything becomes equally meaningless. As a superficial reading of impermanence might suggest, the effect is the opposite things become meaningful in proportion to their actual significance, rather than in proportion to their perceived permanence. The conversation with a person you love is not less valuable because it will end. It is more vivid because it is happening now, once in a form that will never be exactly repeated. This is why the Japanese aesthetic places such emphasis on the seasonal and the ephemeral. A meal made with ingredients at their exact peak. A garden designed to be most beautiful at a specific moment in the afternoon light. A tea ceremony in which the gathering itself, these particular people, this particular bowl, this particular day, is understood to be occurring once and never again. Not a rehearsal, not a template, the thing itself complete. The idea that changed how I think about time is not that there is too little of it. It is that treating time as a resource to be managed is already a way of being absent from it, already an orientation toward a future moment when time will finally be spent correctly, when the systems will work, when enough will have been accomplished, to justify the experience of living rather than its perpetual preparation. Mujo dissolves this orientation not by providing a better system, but by removing the premise. There is no future moment when time will be handled well, enough to justify presence. There is only this moment, which is already dissolving, which contains everything available. The cherry blossoms last 1 week in Japan. People travel across the country to see them. They bring food and sit beneath the trees for hours. They take photographs they already know cannot capture what they are seeing. They return the following year to do it again, knowing it will be different, knowing it will still end. They are not confused about impermanence. They are practicing it. If that way of inhabiting time, brief, full, unrepeatable, is something you are looking for, follow for more.